The Texas dawn broke like a promise whispered in Spanish, soft, warm, and tinged with the kind of hope that survives despite everything. Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his patrol cap against the rising sun, the familiar weight of his badge pressing against his chest like a question he'd stopped trying to answer years ago. The Rio Grande stretched before him, a ribbon of muddy water that had become the most controversial line in America, and he was one of its guardians. His boots crunched against the desert gravel as he walked the perimeter, radio crackling with the usual chatter. "Unit 47, this is base. Any movement on your sector?" The voice belonged to Captain Harrison, a man whose idea of border security involved building walls high enough to block out the sun itself. Marcus pressed the talk button, his thumb lingering longer than necessary. "Negative base. All quiet on the Western Front." The irony wasn't lost on him, a Rodriguez patrolling to keep other Rodriguezes out. The morning air carried scents that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen, sage, mesquite, and something indefinably sweet that dessert flowers released just before the heat became unbearable. He remembered how Abuela used to say the border was just a scar on the earth's face, not something God had drawn in the dirt. But God didn't issue paychecks, and Marcus had a mortgage in Eagle Pass that wouldn't pay itself. As he rounded the bend near the old cottonwood tree, a landmark that had witnessed more crossings than any government official, movement caught his peripheral vision. Not the usual coyote or jackrabbit, but something distinctly human. Marcus's hand instinctively moved toward his radio, then hesitated. Experience had taught him to observe before reacting, especially in these twilight hours when desperation and hope walked hand in hand across the borderlands. A woman emerged from behind a cluster of prickly pear cacti, her silhouette painted against the apricot sky. She wasn't running, wasn't hiding, two behaviors that typically defined his encounters with civilians in this area. Instead, she moved with purposeful calm, carrying something in her hands. As she drew closer, Marcus could see it was a thermos and what appeared to be a small bag. His training screamed protocol, but something deeper whispered patience. "You're early today," she said, her voice carrying a slight drawl that spoke of East Texas roots. She was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe late 20s, with the kind of sun-kissed skin that came from spending real time outdoors, not vacation time. Her eyes held a directness that made Marcus uncomfortably aware of his uniform, his gun, his role as the barrier between her and whatever brought her here at dawn. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area," Marcus replied, the words automatic but lacking their usual authority. Something about her presence defied the standard script. She didn't look frightened or defiant, just tired in the way people get when they've been carrying heavy truths for too long. "I know exactly where I am, Officer Rodriguez." The use of his name, which she'd somehow gleaned from his name tag, despite the distance and dim light, created an intimacy that protocol hadn't prepared him for. "I come here most mornings. Usually you patrol this section around 6:30, but today you're 20 minutes early." Her observation skills impressed and unsettled him in equal measure. She extended the thermos toward him, steam escaping from its mouth like prayers ascending. "Coffee. Black. No sugar. I figured you might need it, being out here before the sun's even properly up." The gesture was so unexpected, so fundamentally human, that Marcus found himself staring at the offering as if it might contain answers to questions he'd forgotten he was asking. "I can't accept that," he said, though everything in him wanted to reach for it. The aroma alone was better than anything the station vending machine had ever produced. "Department policy. Department policy doesn't keep you warm when the desert wind cuts through that uniform," she replied, setting the thermos on a flat rock between them. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I teach 4th grade at Eagle Pass Elementary, and I've been coming here for 6 months to leave water and food for people who need it. I'm not asking you to compromise anything except maybe your assumption about why I'm here." The space between them felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Marcus realized he was standing at one of those moments that would either pass into forgotten routine or alter the trajectory of everything that followed. Sarah Mitchell fourth-grade teacher and apparent humanitarian, had just handed him something more complex than coffee. She'd offered him a choice between the man he'd become and the man he'd once dreamed of being. The radio crackled again, Captain Harrison's voice cutting through the morning stillness like a blade. "Unit 47, report your status." Marcus looked at Sarah, then at the thermos, steam still rising like incense in the desert dawn. "Some promises," he thought, "are made before you even know you're making them." Marcus reached for the thermos, his fingers brushing against the warm metal as Harrison's voice demanded an answer through the radio static. "Unit 47, this is base. I need that status report now." The urgency in his captain's tone suggested this wasn't routine check-in protocol. Sarah's eyes never left Marcus's face as he lifted the radio to his mouth, and in that moment he realized she was measuring him just as carefully as he was measuring her. "Unit 47 to base, sector clear, conducting routine inspection of the perimeter fence." The lie slipped out easier than the truth would have, and Sarah's slight nod indicated she understood the significance of his choice. She began unpacking items from her bag, bottles of water, energy bars, small packets of electrolyte powder, arranging them with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times before. "Roger that, Unit 47. We've got reports of increased activity in your area. Keep your eyes open and report anything unusual immediately." Harrison's voice carried the weight of suspicion, as if he could somehow detect deception through radio waves. Marcus wondered if his captain had received specific intelligence or if this was another one of his random tests of loyalty. As the radio fell silent, Sarah continued her work, transforming the flat rock into a makeshift supply station. "Increased activity," she repeated softly, a bitter smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "That's what they call desperation now. Increased activity." She looked up at Marcus, her hands still busy with her humanitarian preparations. "Do you know what I call it? Tuesday." Marcus unscrewed the thermos cap, inhaling the rich aroma of coffee that had been brewed with actual care rather than government-issued indifference. The first sip was revelation, complex, smooth, with hints of cinnamon and something he couldn't identify, but that reminded him of his mother's kitchen on Christmas morning. "This is incredible," he admitted, surprised by his own honesty. "My grandmother's recipe," Sarah said, settling onto a sun-warmed boulder with the casual grace of someone comfortable in wild spaces. She was a refugee from the Dust Bowl, came to Texas with nothing but a coffee grinder and the knowledge that dignity tastes better when it's shared. She paused, watching Marcus's reaction. Funny how history repeats itself, isn't it? Different decade, different desperation, same human need for compassion. The parallel she drew between Depression-era migration and current border crossings hit Marcus with unexpected force. His own grandparents had arrived from Michoacán with similar hopes and equally empty pockets, though their story had become family legend rather than political controversy. "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman," he said, meaning it. "She was. She also would have skinned me alive for letting good coffee go to waste while a working man stood thirsty in the desert." Sarah's laugh held genuine warmth, and Marcus found himself smiling despite the complexity of their situation. She used to say that the only border that really matters is the one between kindness and cruelty, and we get to choose which side we live on every single day. A distant sound interrupted their conversation, the low rumble of an approaching vehicle, still too far away to identify, but close enough to change the dynamic of their encounter. Marcus's training kicked in automatically, his posture shifting to full alert as he scanned the horizon. Sarah noticed his change immediately, her own body language becoming more cautious, though not fearful. "Department vehicle?" she asked, already beginning to pack up her supplies with practiced speed. Her movements were efficient, but not panicked, suggesting this wasn't her first potentially compromising encounter with law enforcement. Marcus listened carefully, parsing the engine sound against his mental catalogue of patrol unit acoustics. Too heavy, probably one of the civilian contractor trucks. He paused, considering their options. Sarah, you need to understand something. What you're doing here, regardless of your intentions, it's technically illegal. Providing aid to undocumented border crossers can be prosecuted as harboring or smuggling. And what you're doing right now, sharing coffee with someone who's technically committing those crimes, that could cost you your job, she replied, meeting his gaze directly. So I guess we're both taking risks we didn't plan on taking when we woke up this morning. The vehicle sound grew closer, and Marcus could now distinguish the distinctive rumble of Tommy Hendrix's pickup truck. Tommy ran supplies for the various contractor crews that maintained fence lines and sensor equipment, and his route often brought him through this sector around dawn. More importantly, Tommy was known for his loose tongue and his close relationship with Captain Harrison. "We need to wrap this up," Marcus said, reluctance clear in his voice despite the professional necessity. He finished the coffee quickly, savoring the last few drops before handing the thermos back to Sarah. "Thank you for this. It was unexpected. The best things usually are," Sarah replied, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Before turning to leave, she looked back at Marcus with an expression that seemed to see past his uniform to something deeper. "Same time tomorrow, Officer Rodriguez?" The question hung in the desert air like a challenge, a promise, and a prayer all wrapped together. Marcus watched her walk away, her figure growing smaller against the vast Texas landscape, and realized that Sarah Mitchell had just offered him something far more dangerous than coffee. She'd offered him hope. 3 weeks passed, and Marcus found himself altering his patrol route to include the cottonwood tree at exactly 6:10 each morning. Sarah was always there, thermos in hand, transforming their clandestine encounters into something that felt dangerously close to routine. What had begun as cautious curiosity had evolved into conversations that stretched the boundaries of everything Marcus thought he knew about duty, compassion, and the invisible lines that separated right from wrong. "Tell me about your family," Sarah said one morning, settling onto her usual boulder while Marcus accepted his daily cup of coffee. The question caught him off guard, personal in a way their previous exchanges hadn't been. They discussed policy, philosophy, even the weather, but Sarah was now venturing into territory that felt more intimate than professional protocol could accommodate. Marcus hesitated, aware that sharing personal details would deepen whatever connection was forming between them. "My parents came here from Michoacan in 1985, he heard himself saying. "My father worked construction. My mother cleaned houses. They saved every penny to bring my grandmother north, then my uncle, then my cousin Elena." The name slipped out before he could stop it, and something flickered across Sarah's face. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. "Elena," she repeated softly. "That's a beautiful name. Is she still in Texas?" The casual way she asked the question seemed loaded with significance Marcus couldn't quite decode. Sarah's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, and for the first time since their meetings began, she seemed nervous. "We lost touch with her 5 years ago," Marcus admitted, surprised by how much the admission still hurt. "She was trying to bring her children north, but something went wrong during the crossing. We never found out what happened." The desert wind picked up, scattering dust across their makeshift meeting spot, and Marcus found himself sharing grief he'd rarely voiced aloud. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight Marcus hadn't heard before. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. There's a woman who comes to the community center where I volunteer. She's been living in Eagle Pass undocumented for 3 years, working as a housekeeper, sending money back to Mexico. Her name is Elena Vasquez, and she has 2 children, a boy named Diego and a girl named Carmen." The coffee cup slipped from Marcus's hands, hitting the rock with a sharp crack that echoed across the desert morning. Coffee spread across the stone like spilled secrets, dark and irreversible. "Elena Vasquez," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Diego and Carmen, those are my nephew and niece. Those are my family. She mentions her brother sometimes," Sarah continued, her words careful and measured. Says he became a border patrol agent, that the family was angry with him for taking the job. She's proud of him, but she's also afraid. Afraid that if he knew she was here, he'd have to choose between his duty and his blood. The irony crashed over Marcus like a desert flash flood, sudden, overwhelming, and impossible to escape. For 3 weeks, he'd been meeting secretly with a woman who was helping his own sister, the sister his family had mourned as lost. Elena was alive, was here, was surviving in the shadows while he patrolled the very boundaries that kept them apart. The badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier than ever, its weight no longer just professional but deeply, painfully personal. "I want to see her," he said, the words coming out rougher than intended. "Sarah, I need to see my sister." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding flooding her expression. "She works every Tuesday evening at the community center, helping with the children's program. She doesn't know I know you, doesn't know we've been meeting." She paused, studying Marcus's face with new intensity. "But Marcus, you need to understand, seeing her changes everything, for both of you." Everything was already changed, Marcus realized. The moment Sarah had spoken Elena's name, the careful compartments he'd constructed between duty and family, between law and love, had collapsed like border fences in a hurricane. Tuesday evening arrived with the weight of a reckoning. Marcus sat in his truck outside the Eagle Pass Community Center, hands trembling as he gripped the steering wheel. Through the windows, he could see children playing in the main hall, while adults moved between folding tables, their voices carrying the musical cadence of Spanish that had filled his childhood home. Sarah had texted him Elena's description: petite, wearing a blue cardigan, hair pulled back in a bun, but Marcus knew he'd recognize his sister anywhere. He entered through the side door, keeping his uniform covered beneath a worn denim jacket. The familiar scents of fresh coffee and homemade tamales transported him instantly to family gatherings that felt like lifetime ago. A little girl with pigtails ran past, chasing a soccer ball, her laughter pure and uninhibited. For a moment, Marcus forgot why he was there, lost in the simple joy of community that transcended borders and documents. Then he saw her. Elena stood near the children's reading corner, helping a young boy with his homework, her patient voice explaining math problems in the same gentle tone she'd used to help Marcus with his own studies 20 years earlier. Time seemed to collapse. She looked older, wearier, but unmistakably his sister. The recognition hit him like a physical blow, years of grief and worry crystallizing into overwhelming relief. Elena looked up, and their eyes met across the crowded room. Her pencil fell from nerveless fingers, her face cycling through disbelief, joy, and sudden terror as she registered his presence. Marcus took a step forward, then stopped, realizing how his appearance here might be interpreted by the other community members. A border patrol agent in their sanctuary could only mean trouble. "Tia Elena, who is that man?" The little boy's question cut through the tension, his young voice curious rather than afraid. Elena's protective instincts kicked in immediately, her body positioning itself between Marcus and the child. "It's okay, mijo," she said softly, though her eyes never left Marcus's face. "Why don't you go help your mama in the kitchen?" The boy scampered away, leaving brother and sister staring at each other across a gulf that measured more than distance. Sarah appeared at Marcus's elbow, her presence grounding him in the moment. "Elena," she called gently, "there's someone I'd like you to meet, someone who's been looking for you for a very long time." Her words were carefully chosen, designed to ease rather than alarm. Elena approached slowly, each step weighted with 5 years of separation and fear. When she finally stood before Marcus, close enough to touch, she whispered, "Marcos, is it really you?" Her use of his childhood name broke something loose in his chest, and he nodded, not trusting his voice. "Hermana," he managed finally, the single word carrying years of regret, love, and desperate hope. Elena's composure crumbled, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to touch his cheek, as if confirming he was real. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered. I thought the family hated me for leaving, for putting the children at risk. We thought you were dead, Marcus replied, his own tears falling freely now. We mourned you, Elena. We never stopped looking. Around them, the community center continued its evening rhythm. But for Marcus and Elena, the world had narrowed to this moment of impossible reunion. The revelation that Elena was alive should have been pure joy, but Marcus discovered that miracles come with complications. Over the following weeks, his secret meetings with Sarah expanded to include clandestine visits with his sister, each encounter deepening his emotional investment while exponentially increasing his professional risk. Elena's stories of survival painted a picture of resilience that both amazed and haunted him. 3 years of invisible existence, working multiple jobs under borrowed names, sending money home to parents who believed she was dead. Captain Harrison's been asking questions, Sarah warned during one of their dawn meetings. Her usual calm demeanor carried an edge of concern that made Marcus's stomach tighten. Someone reported seeing a border patrol agent at the community center. He's launching an internal investigation. Marcus felt the walls closing in around them. Harrison had always been suspicious, but now his paranoia had a target. How much time do we have? He asked, already calculating exit strategies and worst-case scenarios. I don't know, Sarah admitted. But Marcus, there's something else. Elena wants to turn herself in, wants to start the legal immigration process. She thinks that if she cooperates, demonstrates her community ties, maybe she has a chance at getting documentation. Sarah's expression suggested she didn't share Elena's optimism about the system's capacity for mercy. The idea of Elena voluntarily entering the deportation machinery made Marcus's blood run cold. She can't do that. The current climate, the backlog in immigration courts, she could be separated from her children for years, maybe forever. His voice carried the authority of someone who'd witnessed the system's failures firsthand. That's what I told her, Sarah replied. But she's tired of hiding, tired of living in fear that every knock on the door might be her last night with Diego and Carmen. She wants her children to know their uncle, wants them to understand they have family who loves them. Before Marcus could respond, his radio crackled with an urgent transmission that made his blood freeze. All units, this is base. We have intelligence indicating a large-scale crossing planned for tonight, Sector 7 through 12. Report to station immediately for briefing and deployment. Harrison's voice carried the excitement of a hunter who'd found fresh tracks. Sector 9. Elena's neighborhood. Marcus's throat went dry as the implications crashed over him. If this was legitimate intelligence, and Harrison's sources were usually reliable, tonight's operation would sweep through the community center area, through Elena's apartment building, through every place undocumented families sought shelter. I have to go, he told Sarah, urgency making his movements sharp and efficient. That briefing, it's about Elena's area. They're planning raids tonight. Sarah's face went pale. How long do we have to warn people? Sarah, no. Marcus's voice carried the weight of desperate authority. If you start making calls, sending warnings, they'll trace it back to you. And if they trace it back to you, they'll know about us, about Elena, about everything. So, what do you suggest? Sarah's question hung between them like a challenge. That I let families be torn apart because it's inconvenient for your career. The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to cut deep. Marcus was facing the moment he'd been dreading since their first meeting, the inevitable collision between his heart and his badge, between the man he'd become and the man he wanted to be. Give me 2 hours, he said finally. Let me see what I can learn at the briefing, see if there's a way to... To what? Sarah interrupted. To save everyone? To be the hero in a system designed to break people? Her anger was righteous, but it was also desperate. Marcus, sometimes you have to choose a side. Tonight might be that time. As Marcus drove toward the station, Elena's face haunted his thoughts. His sister, who'd survived so much, who'd built a life from nothing, who trusted him to protect the family she'd sacrificed everything for. Tonight, he would discover whether love was stronger than duty, whether blood was thicker than badges. The briefing room buzzed with the controlled energy of impending action. Marcus sat in the back row, watching Captain Harrison spread maps across the table with the enthusiasm of a general planning conquest. Red circles marked target locations. Arrows indicated sweep patterns, and numbers assigned personnel to specific raids. The precision was impressive and terrifying. Elena's apartment building was circled in thick red marker. Intelligence indicates approximately 30 to 40 undocumented individuals in this sector, Harrison announced, his laser pointer dancing across the map. We'll coordinate with ICE agents, hit multiple locations simultaneously to prevent flight response. This is a significant operation, people. Career-making numbers if we execute properly. Marcus's hands clenched beneath the table as Harrison detailed the timeline. Teams would deploy at midnight, establish perimeters by 12:30, begin raids at 1 a.m. when families would be asleep and disoriented. The tactical advantage of surprise, Harrison explained, was psychological as much as practical. Fear paralyzed resistance. Rodriguez, Harrison's voice cut through Marcus's spiraling thoughts. You'll lead Team 3, apartment complex on Riverside Drive, 42 units, likely our highest concentration of targets. The assignment felt like cosmic cruelty. Harrison was ordering him to arrest his own sister. As the briefing concluded, Marcus lingered, pretending to study his sector assignment while his mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. He could call in sick, claim equipment malfunction, create a distraction that delayed the entire operation. But each option carried consequences that extended far beyond his own career. Other agents would take his place, other families would suffer, and Elena would still be caught in the net. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Community meeting at 8 p.m. Families asking questions about rumors, need guidance. The message carried subtext Marcus understood. People were scared, seeking reassurance he couldn't provide without compromising everything. Marcus made his choice in the parking lot, under fluorescent lights that hummed with electric tension. He called Sarah from his personal phone, voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. The raids are real. Tonight, starting at 1 a.m. Elena's building is a primary target. Sarah's intake of breath was sharp, audible. How long do we have? 4 hours to get people out or hidden. But Sarah, if you act on this information and they trace it back, I understand the risks, she interrupted. Some things are more important than safety. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his badge, his oath, his family's trust, all pressing down like desert heat. I'm going to try to delay my team, create confusion, buy you more time. But after tonight, everything changes. We can't go back to coffee and conversation. I know, Sarah whispered. Marcus, whatever happens tonight, what we found together, what you're choosing to do, it matters. It's who you really are. As Marcus hung up, he realized Sarah was wrong about one thing. This wasn't about discovering who he really was. It was about deciding who he wanted to become. Tonight, in the space between midnight and dawn, Marcus Rodriguez would either remain a loyal agent or transform into something more dangerous. A man willing to sacrifice everything for love. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain that might or might not come, and Marcus drove toward a reckoning that would redefine the meaning of promises, duty, and the borders that truly matter.